Good afternoon. My name is Tammy Williams. I'm the prosecutor on this matter. Everyone has the right for peaceful enjoyment of their child. They get to live in their house without being disturbed. But that's not usually the case when you live in close proximity to neighbors. When you live next to people, that makes some issues arise, including loud partying, loud noises, barking dogs, but that causes your your life to be annoying or disturbing, and that peace of mind that you have living in your house might just go away because of that. This case that we have today is not about a noise disturbance. It's not about barking. It's a lot more than that. The defendant's dogs in this case are barking all day and night, non-stop, at all hours of the day and all hours of the night. We hear the testimony of the defendant's neighbor, and she will tell you how her life has been disrupted by the annoyance of the barking dog. She will tell you that she tried multiple times. To resolve the matter amicably. And she would go and knock on the defendant's house door, but he is nowhere to be found, and he doesn't answer his door. You will hear the testimony of the police officer. He will tell you that he arrived at the defendant's property and he could hear the dogs barking for the entire duration that he was there. And the dogs were barking across the defendant's real property boundary. I would like you to weigh the evidence and hear the testimony. And if you believe that I have met my burden, you have to find the defendant guilty. Thank you.
Good afternoon again, everyone. What the city attorney has told you sounds like a pretty cut and dry case, open and shut, black and white. But there are some things that they didn't tell you that might just throw a little bit of gray in there. What they didn't tell you is that Mr. Cole has these dogs for security. The neighborhood had specifically had a rash of break-ins and vandalism. So Mr. Cole went and got the dogs to alert whenever anybody was at or near his property. So when the dogs continued barking at an officer, they were doing their job. They also said that they were barking all day and night. What they didn't say is, do other neighbors have dogs? Was it just Mr. Cole's dogs? Were Mr. Cole's dogs barking at that rate or frequency at all? And across a boundary that is a fence line, a chain link fence between two neighbors. Doesn't muffle sounds, it doesn't change sounds. It's a fence. And so Mr. Cole sits here before you today, presumed innocent. And I'd like you to keep that in mind when you hear the evidence of any and all of the witnesses and before any verdict. Thank you.
You can call your first witness.
City calls Tammy Olson.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give is the truth and the whole truth under penalty of perjury.
Yes, ma'am.
And you can have a seat, ma'am. There's a microphone that's in front of you. The lady behind you is my court reporter. She has to take down everything being stated here today, so we need your responses to be verbal and loud and clear. So if it's a yes or no, we need you to say yes or no, because we can't write down head nods or shakes accurately, okay?
Yes.
You're going to stop speaking if either of the attorneys say objection. It doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. It just means there's a rule of evidence that they don't believe you could give that response. I would have to make a ruling on that. So you would have to stop making your answer immediately so that I can give that ruling, and then I'll tell you if you can give us the answer or not, okay?
Yes.
I want you to state your first and last name, spell both of them.
Tammy Olson, TAMARIE OLSON.
Council.
Good afternoon, Ms. Olson. Can you please tell us where do you live? Where's the address?
305 Paris Avenue.
And that's behind 304 Denver Street. Is that in the city of Lansing?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell me what has been happening?
I have lived there for 5 years, and the first 2 years before he got the Doberman pincher were okay. Since he got the Doberman pincher, it does not stop barking, and it is all day, all night long. I have tried to approach him to say things. He just moves the dogs closer to my fence. Then there has been prior occasions to where I've also had to call the cops because the dog was dangling from the fence from 7 o'clock in the morning until I got home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a 90-degree day, that he could not get to his water or his food. Till like the animal control comes and untangles him, lets him get to his water, whatever. And there was another incident that he put tree twigs behind
Your
the
Honor, I'm gonna
dogs.
object. There hasn't been a question over a minute. Is there a question?
That's good. So that it's a narrative, so you need to break it up into questions.
Can you please tell me how often do you hear the dogs bark?
Every day, every morning, every night. During the day, it's not like it's a problem, but when it's 5 o'clock in the morning, or whenever at night, you know, it kind of puts a draining on you, and then I can't even open my doors, my windows, because I live directly behind him. And I shouldn't have to move because he cannot keep his dogs under control.
So do you hear the dogs barking from your house
Yes, ma'am.
and through your windows?
Yes,
You know the owner of the dogs.
well, I don't know him, but he is my neighbor behind me.
Can't hear him bark.
Yes,
Can you point to him?
yes. I'm sorry that I have to do this.
The record reflect that Ms. Olson has identified the situation.
Any objection to identification?
Your Honor, can we have some further identification other than a point that cannot be reflected for the record?
Can you
Correct.
please describe
Him
what he's wearing?
right there, he's wearing a yellow checkered shirt.
No objections to identification.
Identification is noted.
You tried to talk to him about the barking dogs,
I have prior in the past, yes.
and what was the result of that?
He moved the dog closer to the back of my fence, or to the back of the fence. That was his result in trying to fix the matter, was moving the dog closer to the fence. And then not only that, he got another dog. One of the dogs passed away, so he got another dog. So there's now 3 of them.
And what does that matter, moving it closer to the fence?
Why would he do that? After I go to ask him and tell him if he can try to quiet his dogs down or do something in the matter of them constantly barking, and he moves them closer to my fence. How would anybody feel about that?
What made you call the police?
The continuous barking. After so long, it really gets very annoying. And I shouldn't have to move out of my neighborhood because of his dog.
Do you know how many times you called the police?
There's been several times that I've called the police, I've called animal control.
Is it because the dogs are barking all the time?
Yes. And I feel bad for them. Prince is a
Ma'am,
very good.
ma'am, you can only answer her
Oh, I'm
question.
sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Olson, for being here. It sounds like this is a bit of a difficult situation for you to testify to. Is that true?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because he's my neighbor and I don't want to have problems with my neighbor.
Sure. Why is it that you think you're here then?
Because it's not fair. So we have to listen to that. Not only am I the only, that I'm not the only neighbor that's called. There's been other neighbors that have called. There's other incidents with those dogs.
And so in the time that you've been there, you said approximately 2 years.
I've been there 5 years and I've had to call the cops probably about 7 to 10 times. And that's not just myself, it's also other neighbors as well.
On a day-to-day basis, if you were to go into your backyard, what would you see across the property line?
I see Prince on the chain with his broken house and tree twigs all over the entire yard, pallets all over the entire yard. The dogs get stuck in the pallets to where they cannot move, and that is sickening to have to watch.
Can you describe what you mean by pallets?
Wood pallets that try to because the dog has gotten loose and he gets off the fence, and Mr. Cole has put in pallets against the fence to stop that, and the dogs get stuck on them.
And you said Prince or Prince?
Prince is his name.
Prince is the dog's name?
Yes.
Okay.
And he is not an aggressive dog at all. He just barks continuously. And I feel like there's something wrong with the dog, and I have a heart. And I don't want to see a dog dangling from the fence.
Okay. When the dogs are outside, is it typical that they're outside?
24/7.
And
Out of the 5 years that I've lived there, I've possibly seen Prince, and I don't know about the other dogs because I can't see them because they're in the driveway. Maybe 2 to 3 times that they've been within the house that I don't see Prince.
okay.
But other than that, they are outside 24/7.
And when they're outside, are they free to roam in the backyard?
They're tied up, they're on chains.
And where do those chains connect to? Do you know?
That I can't really tell where the chains are connected to, but I believe Prince's chain possibly on the fence, but I don't know for sure.
Okay, but you see food and water.
I see a bucket of water that he goes to quite often, and then he walks right away because there's no one in there.
And you described an incident in which one of the dogs got stuck on the fence. Can you more accurately describe
Objection,
that?
Your Honor, relevance. That's not what we're here about today in any capacity.
What's the relevance?
She had to previously describe that the dog was barking.
We
and it was
understand that,
hanging
but
on the fence.
we understand that, but I want to know what is the relevance for describing how the dog was hanging.
I think that goes towards why perhaps the dog was barking and then the duration of time, because she is giving her a period of time, which goes towards an element of the crime.
Okay, maybe you can clarify as to what, if based on her observation, the dog was barking because of the hanging, and then if that's the case, then I'll allow that question.
You had described earlier an incident in which the dog had gotten stuck on the fence and was barking. Do you have any perception of why the dog may have been barking on that occasion?
Because he was stuck on the fence for 8-hour work shift of mine and on a 90-degree day.
Okay, so you observed it before you left for work.
Yes, and I had to go to work
What time approximately was that?
about 7 a.m.,
Okay, and when did you return?
about 3:45.
And at that time, what did you observe?
He was still stuck on the fence, and then at that point, that's when I called animal control and the police.
Let me get a clarifying question. You don't work from home, do you?
No,
Okay, so you had left and came back. Okay.
yes.
Are there other specific notable incidents in which you recall the dogs barking?
I had called, so this is the last time that I called the police. There was tree twigs behind his dog fence, and he was stuck at the collar by one of them to where he could not lift up his head. And he could only lift up the back part of his body. And I don't know if Cole, Mr. Cole remembers, but when he was outside, I had approached him to let him know that me and an officer got the dog unstuck because Prince is not aggressive at all. He is a good dog. There's just something wrong with him, why he barks so much, and the fact that when he was stuck with the collar, the police officer tried to climb over the fence, and she took another tree branch and was able to get the chain link off of the tree branch that was sticking up, and then he was able to be free.
And your testimony here today, is it because you have anything against your neighbor?
Absolutely not.
Is it because you believe that a violation of local law has occurred by the dog's bark?
Yes.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Olson.
Good afternoon.
You said you rent. Are you the one that rents the home at 305 Terrace?
Yes, ma'am.
And have you at any point ever made actual contact with Mr. Cole about the dogs?
Yes.
Remember when that was?
I don't exactly remember when that was. There's been 3 different occasions that when he was outside feeding the dogs, that's when I had approached him.
And are you aware that there are cameras on Mr. Cole's property?
No.
And you had stated earlier in your testimony that Mr. Cole then moved, I believe what you said was the only Prince closer to you. And it is only Prince you are claiming that barks. Is that
Yes.
right? Did Mr. Cole have to change how he keeps his dogs in his backyard to do that?
What do you mean?
You said he moved, so where was Prince before?
He was up closer to his shed.
Okay, this was about the time Mr. Cole would have then had 3 dogs, correct?
I believe that would have been when he had 2 dogs at the time.
But keeping the dogs separated would also have been a reason to have the dog chained up somewhere else, that the 2 dogs were kept separate.
I'm confused with your question.
That you don't actually know that Mr. Cole moved Prince closer to you only to mess with you, correct?
I don't know that, but wouldn't that be what you would think as a person that you go and tell him what his dog is doing, and then he moves him closer to your fence? Not only that, but he scoops his dog poop at the edge of the fence as well, since we want to put that out there. I mean, how is that fair? Why should I have to put up with that?
Do you have any dogs?
No, I do not.
Does your neighbor on Parish Street have any dogs?
The 2 neighbors on the side of me, the one on
Yes.
the left does not, but the one on the right does.
Do they bark?
No. Well, the one directly next to me, they just got from the animal shelter, and he is very skittish, so they don't even let that dog outside. The dog 2 houses down, yes, that dog is a very noisy dog as well, but not as much as the Prince.
Have you called in complaints about that dog before?
No, but why is that relevant for this dog?
You can't ask questions, you can only answer
Okay, I'm
questions.
sorry.
So you stated that the dogs bark all morning and all night,
Yes,
but you also told the judge you go to work. How do you know? that
there's
they're barking?
certain days that I don't go to work, like I don't work 7 days a week.
And you never at any point learned to tone it out as background noise?
No, ma'am.
And
I mean, I've had to turn my TV up so I can try to not hear the dog barking. That doesn't work because I live directly behind.
so you had stated you'd called approximately 7 to 10 times over the 5-year span you've been there,
Yes,
and that you're alleging other neighbors have called as well?
I know other neighbors have called. They just never came forward like I have.
How often do you watch Mr. Cole's back there?
Let me see, probably every day because I have to walk to my back door. In our backyards are completely open. The only thing that's stopping it is a see-through fence.
You're calling, what number are you calling to report these noise violations?
I called the 911 number, I called the 483-4600 number, I called animal control.
Do you have any veterinary training?
Actually, I did work, well, I don't have veterinarian training, but I did work at Elegant Pooch, which is a dog grooming, and they keep dogs there.
So you have no other information about the dogs not being well kept other than your
Well, the
thoughts?
fact that you can see almost all of their bones, like Prince's bones, you can pretty much see his bones coming through his skin. So that means something.
And you had claimed that, how many dogs have you ever seen on Mr. Paul's property?
I think 4 total. One of them passed away.
Know that, or
That I don't know if he passed away, but he was gone and he was very old. And so I just assumed that the dog had passed away. And then he got another one just shortly after.
How many dogs are there?
3 that I know of.
No further questions this time?
Redirect.
None, Your Honor.
Any questions from the jury for this witness? You can write a question. You can write your question down, please. You know the names of the other dogs?
No, I do not.
Is there a particular reason why you're familiar and you only are discussing Prince versus the other ones?
Mr. Cole had told me his name at one point when we were talking about the dogs.
Okay. And is Prince the one that's the only one that's barking, or is it the other
That's
dogs?
the only one that I know that, like, I can't, yes, Prince is the only one that barks. So
The other dogs aren't barking, it's just Prince.
Yes.
Any other questions? Any redirect or cross based on that?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Name it, and Ms. Olson be excused from the stand.
Yes, she may.
Thank you, Ms. Olson, you may be excused. I'm not gonna excuse you because I don't know if you need it for rebuttal, I'm just gonna let her be excused from this thing. And you can call your next witness.
City Hall Officer Tyler Stover.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give us the truth and the whole truth under penalty of perjury.
I swear.
Thank you. Officer Stover, if you could state your first and last name, spell both.
Tyler Stover, TYLERSTOVER.
Your witness, counsel.
Afternoon, Officer Stover. Can you please tell me where do you work?
I work for the Lansing Police Department.
And how long have you worked for LPD?
A little over 2 years now.
In what capacity did you work?
I've worked as a patrol officer in the Tri-County.
I would like to direct your attention to October 2nd, 2023. Were you working on that date?
I was.
Were you working in your patrol capacity?
I was.
Can you tell me what happened around 6:30 a.m. on October 2nd, 23?
I was dispatched to 304 Denver Street for a noise complaint.
Can you tell me if this address is in the city of Lansing?
It is.
Is it a residential neighborhood, residential area?
It is. It's a.
So what happened after you received the call?
So I was dispatched up 304 Denver Street. I went out there. I spoke with a neighbor on Paris Avenue, I believe, 305 Paris. They were the complainant that called about the dog, the barking dog. Then I went over to 304 Denver Street. I heard the dog. I was out there for about 10 minutes, went in the backyard of the address on Paris Street. I observed, I believe it was 2 dogs in the backyard chained up, and they were barking the entire time I was out there.
Let me back up a little bit. Where did you park your police car?
I believe initially I parked it in front of the Denver address.
And did you hear the dogs barking as soon as you got out of your car?
I did.
And did you walk around the property on Denver?
I went around to the street south of that, which is Paris Avenue, to the complainant's house. I asked if I could go in their backyard. I went in their backyard. And that's where I observed a few vehicles in the backyard, and then I also saw the animals chained down.
And after you went to this property and saw the dogs barking for the entire time that you were there, did you conclude that any crime has been committed?
Yes, it was a noise ordinance violation.
Thank you.
That's it, yeah.
Good afternoon, Officer Stover.
Yeah.
What is it about this date, the October 2nd date, that makes you remember it specifically?
I've got a fairly good memory, and I remember going out there at the house. I spoke with the neighbor fairly extensively, and they were fairly excited about the.
You said that you had attempted contact. What did that look like?
I believe that I knocked on the door at 304 Denver Street.
There was no follow-up phone calls, no letter left, anything like that for Mr. Cole?
Correct.
And you said that you had parked initially, or at least you recall parking initially on Denver. Was that correct?
I believe so, yes.
So in front of the house. And then you went into the backyard at 305 Paris.
Correct.
Did the complaining witness follow you into the backyard at that time?
I believe we had a conversation in the backyard and the back porch, yes.
Okay. And then you remembered 2 dogs being there at that time, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
And were there, could you, with your observation, could you observe any other dogs at any other houses?
Not that I recall. No.
Okay, so the only dogs barking in that neighborhood you recall would have been Mr. Cole's dogs?
Correct, because that's where I was dispatched to, so that's where my attention was directed.
Okay, so you didn't hear no other dogs were responding to the barking that was coming from that address?
Not that I recall.
No further questions from this witness.
Maybe. Any questions from the jury for this witness? Is this witness be excused? Thank you, Officer Stover. Call your next witness.
Your Honor, the city rests this case.
Okay, let me have a quick break for the jury, which is probably timely because I think I have some civil stuff coming at 2 o'clock anyway. They should go get paid now. Yes, thank you. All right, for the jury, you're not free to deliberate. You're gonna go down to Treasury so you can collect your checks, and then you'll come back to the jury room.
Yeah.
was a motion to set aside the dismissal. Why did we dismiss it? They didn't appear? I dismissed it. Y'all didn't appear? Huh? I said, so that must have been. Everybody else is here. On the record in the matter of Cap Commercial Development versus Ellison Brewery and Aaron Hansen, file number 24-00226. Council appearance.
Yes, good afternoon, Your Honor. Ronald Bach here for plaintiff KAP Commercial Development LLC.
Thank you. And today was the date set for a motion to set aside a dismissal. And you filed this motion, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay, no one's appeared on behalf of Ellison Brewery or Aaron Hansen. You can proceed with your motion.
Okay, thank you, Judge. I didn't really expect them to appear. They've never appeared in the past. We filed this eviction, but the jurisdictional limitation on the money judgment exceeds the district court. They have vacated the property. I apologize. I missed the pretrial because I put it on the wrong date on my calendar. I did notice that day. I did email your staff that day, but it was already too late. I'm just asking that you reinstate this matter, and then we can transfer it to the circuit court for the adjudication of the money judgment. It's like $300,000 or something like that.
Motion to set aside dismissal is granted. Will reinstate the case, enter a default judgment, and you can submit an order to the court.
We'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And obviously, if we don't get the order, then they're going to ask me to put another dismissal in there. So don't forget to send us the order.
Yeah, I will get that in tomorrow, Judge. I am homesick today. I don't even have the file on me. Just winging
Feel
it.
better.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you, Judge. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Bye-bye.
I don't see anybody here on the discovery matter. There's no attorney on that though. No, there was a Cooper.
Oh, yeah.
Discovery matter. Back on the record in the matter of the people of the city of Lansing versus Frank Cole. Are we going to have any defense witnesses?
We are, Your Honor. Defense will be calling Mr. Cole. I would also be making it earlier.
Okay, you can make your motion.
Thank you, Your Honor. The beginning of the statute specifically says, no person shall make or continue, cause or permit to be made verbally or mechanically any unnecessary noise disturbance, and then the subpart D would be specifically the animals and birds. Your Honor, I would make the argument that Ms. Olson testified that over the course of over 5 years, she had called maybe between 7 and 10 times. I don't think less than twice a year can be considered frequently. We never heard any testimony about a continued duration or that noise disturbance either. And so, Your Honor, I would be asking for a directed verdict based on the fact that there has been no real testimony. There's been testimony that there are dogs, but to any, Mr. Cole's definitely the owner of those dogs, or that there were frequent or continued noise disturbances. Is when asked, she could not come up with specific days or times other than this one.
Thank you.
Your Honor, there was specific testimony about the time frame by which she has been residing at the property, specifically when the noise began, when the owner obtained prints in question approximately 2 years ago. She testified that the noise, in her words, was all day and all night. When questioned by defense counsel as to how can you testify to that, she stated, there are days I do not work and I am home, I hear it. And so there has been specific testimony about it for periods of long duration, as she described it, all day and all night. and specific instances in which she observed the barking as it related to the dog dangling, barking in the morning, then barking at night when she returned to a residence. That would go both towards frequent as well as duration, even though the ordinance has either or. I believe both of those there has been sufficient testimony as to those particular incidents. There's further testimony that it can be heard from her property line, which would be crossing the boundary line in a residential zone, and that her quietude has been disturbed by that.
Any, re-argue?
No, you're right.
Okay. The ordinance, as indicated by you, Council Woods, was that the elements needed to be proved is that the defendant did own, possess, harbor a bird or other animal, and that the animal frequently or for a continued duration made sounds, and that the sounds created a noise disturbance across the residential or real property boundary in the city of Lansing. And your argument is obviously the testimony indicated by witness Olson was that she may have contacted the police department between 7 to 10 times. I don't know that how many times she contacted the police is an element, because she doesn't have to contact the police every time she believed that there was a disturbance. I think that there was some testimony of her attempts to try to resolve any alleged disturbance, and I don't know that we flushed out or that there was any flushing out of how many times that happens. I can see the concern about, let's say it was only 7 to 10 times that she had a concern about the animal barking, whether or not that rises to the level of frequent or a continued duration. I think that's a question for the jury to decide, though, whether or not they believe that it's frequent or not. That I can see that there would be potential concerns about how frequent duration could be defined, but I didn't draft the ordinance. But I don't think that there is sufficient question to go to the jury, so your motion is denied. And so, did you want to go on to your client before we bring the jury back?
Thank you, Your Honor. You understand that you have the right to remain silent in this case?
Can you speak so that we can hear you?
I'm gonna take the stand.
Okay. This has to be able to pick up on me. Do you understand your right to remain silent? You understand that if you waive that right to silence, that means that you can be cross-examined by the city. It also means that the jury can ask you some questions. Anybody threatening you to get you to give up your right to remain silent at your trial? I'm sorry? Okay, any promises being made to you in exchange for you giving testimony today? Okay. Any other questions for your client?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, we'll bring the jury back.
With this, she about to file back.
No.
Welfare check.
All right, so the jury. Okay, you can be seated. Okay, and the defense can call their first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Defense would call Frank Holt.
You raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give us the truth and the whole truth under penalty of perjury? Thank you. You can have a seat. Counsel, you can proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Cole. Just gonna remind you that this Nash behind you is recording, so we do need verbal answers, no head shaking. Got to be verbal and as loud as you can for us.
Okay.
Mr. Cole, do you currently live at 304 Denver?
Yes, I do.
And do you have dogs at that property?
Mhm.
Why do you have those dogs?
To protect my property.
Was there a reason you got the dogs?
Yes, due to vandalism and neighbors warning me that people walking out of black going through driveways. Particular, my neighbor was to the left of me, and the older lady was moving across the street, and two people down the street.
Do any of your other neighbors have dogs?
Probably every other house in the block.
So approximately how many neighbors would you say, not specifically right next to your neighbors, but in the general city block between your block and the block over, about how many houses would you say there are?
Your Honor, I'm gonna object to this line of questioning because I don't see how it has any relevance to the facts of this parking.
About how many, you asked about how many neighbors or?
Yes, Your Honor, as Mr. Cole just testified, there are other houses with dogs. I'm just trying to get a solid number on that.
Okay, there was testimony in the prosecutor's case in chief about if there were any other dogs or any other neighbors with dogs. And so I think it goes to credibility. So objections overruled.
So
You
might
can,
not
you
know
can answer.
a specific number, but about between the block that you live on and Ms. Olson lives on, approximately how many houses would you say are on those two blocks?
Objection calls for speculation.
You asked about what?
Your Honor, I asked how many in his knowledge or observation, how many houses between the block he lives on and Ms. Olson lives on, how many houses there are?
Well,
And I'm saying he
let's
might
see.
not know an
He-
exact
Yeah, he
number.
doesn't cause speculation. He may know exactly how many houses on his block. It's rare that people know how many houses on the block to the extent he knows. If the answer causes for speculation, then I'll grant your objection.
It's on both blocks by 40 houses.
And approximately how many of those would you say have dogs?
I would say easily 20 to 25,
How do you know this?
because I walk my dog around the block.
Are you seeing the dogs?
Yes, I had.
Okay.
I hear the dog barking.
Specifically, do you have a neighbor whose property line would also adjoin both yours and Ms. Olson's?
Yes, ma'am.
And do they also have dogs?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you hear those dogs barking?
Every time I go in my backyard, every time I pull in the driveway, every time a neighbor coming in and they drive within the distance of those houses, you hear the dogs barking. I video.
The date in question here on October 2nd, did you receive any calls about your dogs? Were you made aware that your dogs were barking at any point in time that day? When you, what's an average day look like for you and your dogs?
Back in the morning, let them out for like 15 to 20 minutes. Put them back in, put them lay back down, get up around 8 o'clock. Let them out for the remainder of the day, feed them, make sure they got water. They get rest. They go to work.
And when you said you feed them, how do you feed them?
Well, I have a container. Orange container, in the container, it's good. I use one in the scoop, which is way over the food that you should use. Make sure the 5-gallon buckets that I have from the go to the top.
With water?
Yes, one.
Do you have anybody else come in and check on the dogs at any point in time?
Yes, my daughter, she stopped me when I know I'm not gonna be home at a certain time because of the dogs. I don't want them to stay at a certain time. I try to have my house no later than 10 o'clock. But if I know it'll be later, because that's the time I get off, I have my daughter over and let them in for me.
Do you ever check on your dogs occasionally during the day?
Yes, when I'm in the neighborhood, not out of town driving, yes, I go by my house to check on
Have you ever had opportunity to observe your dogs barking at people?
them. Yes,
And have you tried to control your dogs?
yes, I do.
What happens when you try to control your dogs?
They be quiet. Sure,
So you'd say generally your dogs are obedient?
yes, they are.
And how many times have you had contact with Miss Olson? Just in general, not.
Maybe once or twice. I could say if she was in the lineup, other than today, I wouldn't be able to pick her out.
So have you ever had a conversation with her about your dog's barking?
About a year ago, been about a year, maybe a little longer, I was letting my dog out for the remainder of the day. And she approached me and asked me like, why does Prince bark like that? In the dark, you got rabbits over there, you got squirrels running, they're gonna bark. And she asked me, I said, I can't control how he bark. You know, God gave me the voice to bark. I said, if you out here, he gonna bark at you because he don't know you.
Did you ever move Prince or his lead at any point in time?
No, I never moved Prince. Prince been there since the 4 years I had him. He's been right there in that spot.
Prosecution,
None, Your Honor.
any questions from the jury for this witness? If you do, just raise your hand. Okay, you can write your question down. How often do you walk your dog?
I let my dogs out and run twice a day. It's in the morning and once I get home at night. Occasionally, I would take him down the block and walk him around from Denver, Paris, back around. I do that about 3 times a month, but I do it at nighttime because ain't too many people out.
Okay, do you dispute the account that the witness gave about your dog being stuck on the fence?
No, I don't dispute that because Miss Ocean, she did, the second time I met her, she did approach me in my backyard and she told me that, I hope you don't be mad, but Prince was tangled up on that, some branches that I had cut out some trees. And I called the police and the police came out and helped me to get him off. So I hope you, I said, I'm not mad, I appreciate it. And that was the extent of our conversation.
Any other questions? May this witness be excused from the witness stand?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. You may be excused, Mr. Cole. Any other witnesses for the defense?
None, Your Honor. Defense progressed.
Are you calling rebuttal witnesses at all? Okay. So that closes proofs. We're gonna take another break. I need to handle a 2:30 case that was on my docket. We'll go over some final jury instructions and then you'll get closing arguments and then I'll give you your final instructions and then you're free to deliberate. This is just a break for you to get a snack and we'll have administration bring you some snacks and for you to stretch, get some air. And then we'll be back to close this out before you can deliberate, okay? You can leave your notes here. All rise for the jury. Oh, there we go. Council Sarhan, we are here on file number 23-0612, is that correct?
Yes, the parties have resolved the matter, Your Honor.
Okay. Let's see, who's joining? Are you filing the resolution through my file?
The defendant just contacted me this morning, said that he faxed it over to our office. I will be countersigning it and doing that later today.
Okay, and what is the resolution?
A stipulated order for conditional dismissal.
Okay, I'll note that here in our file and we'll look to see that file through my file.
All right, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. I see Ken DeMeyers on behalf of defendants, Kenny, and then I see Stillman Law on behalf of PCA Acquisitions.
Yes, hello, Your Honor. Ken Demers appearing on behalf of Mr. Kenny, defendant.
I have not gotten a response on Stillman Law. I don't know if the attorney can hear me. Is there anybody here for Stillman Law? I see a Mimi Kalish.
I'm here, Your Honor. I'm here.
Okay. Can you start your video?
My video is not working for some reason.
Okay, so both parties, this is a pretrial. Both parties are represented by counsel on a general civil pretrial. I typically just put you in a private meeting room so that you all can work through either potential resolution or complete a joint pretrial statement, and you'll file it with the court through my file. We are in the middle of a jury trial, so if you do that, you can message me and let me know you're all set, or you can message me and let me know if you need another date because you need more time to resolve whatever you're working on, okay?
That's fine, Your Honor.
Yes.
So I'm gonna put you both in a private meeting room now.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Are you all set in the breakout room?
Yes, we are getting ready to message you that we wanted just 60 days to try to resolve between the parties.
Okay, we'll set the pre-trial for 60 days. I'll give you the date in just a moment.
July 22nd.
July 22nd at 2:30.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're all set.
You can be seated.
And I forgot to ask if you all approved the jury form. You can show.
Definitely be solid for it.
I was gonna say, I
A
should
single-
submit one.
A
but-
single verdict of, you know.
You all keep that. Okay, we're gonna proceed to closings.
Sure. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate your time. I would like to remind you the elements of the crime that we're looking at today. I mentioned them briefly this morning, but I'm.
You speak a little louder because we turned that fan on.
I will go through the elements one by one. The elements of the crime are which the prosecution has to prove you beyond reasonable doubt. The first one is the defendant owns a dog, which frequently or for a continued duration makes sound that creates a noise disturbance across the residential real property area in the city of Lansing. I believe I have met my verdict. First, you heard Mr. Cole testify that he owns dogs. And in the testimony of Ms. Olson and Officer Stover, you heard how the dogs were barking both frequently and for continued duration. Ms. Olson called the police multiple times because the dogs were barking continuously every minute. And they, in her words, the dogs were barking all day and all night. You also heard her testimony when she said that the dog, one of the dogs was dangling off the fence and barked for almost 8 hours straight. And you also heard the testimony of Mr. Cole, which Ms. Olson told him about that incident and her attempt to try and resolve the situation of the barking dogs. Then the barking dogs did create a noise disturbance because Miss Olson, the sound of the dogs for Miss Olson did disturb her peace and her enjoyment and the time that she can spend peacefully in her property. You also heard the testimony of Officer Stover, who said that he was able to hear the dogs barking across the fence from Mr. Cole's property and Miss Olson's property, and that satisfies the third element. Now, I would like you to consider all the testimony and all the evidence, and I believe that I have met my burden. Therefore, I ask you to find the defendant guilty.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you as well for being here today, Mr. Cole, and I very much appreciate it. What you heard today was a lot about, more so about the conditions the dogs were in. That's not what we're here about. What the city has done is sat here and presented evidence that has confused you or could confuse you, that has created some sort of conflict. It didn't have much to do with the noise. That's what we're here about, is we are here about barking dogs. When pressed, Ms. Olson couldn't give more than a general time frame. She couldn't give more than a general amount of time she had called. She couldn't say specifically any dates or times which she called. She also testified that there were other neighbors that had called. Where are they? If there are other neighbors that have this problem, why aren't they here complaining about it as well? Officer Stover specifically testified he never let Mr. Cole know. Mr. Cole had no idea these issues were going on, other than that one interaction he had with Ms. Olson where she asked why the dog barked. That's the only information he had about this being an issue up until this came up. The city wants you to believe that it has been frequent or often. I would ask that you don't find that 7 to 10 times over 5 years arises to frequent or often. It's less than twice a year, once every 6 months. The only time, and Mr. Cole testified, he has the dogs for security. So when the dogs perceive a threat coming at or near the property, they bark. What the dogs are there to do. They're doing their job. What this is coming down to is criminalizing what Mr. Cole's property is doing under no action of Mr. Cole, without any ability for Mr. Cole to attempt to change the actions. He specifically focused on the dangling dog when he was barking all day and night. Miss Olson admitted she went to work. She doesn't know that the dog continued to bark all day and night, but doubled down on that testimony. She doesn't know. And there were quite a few incidents where either pressed or when asked further questions, the details couldn't be given, or it found out she wasn't actually there. And so I would ask that you return a verdict of not guilty, because noises don't respect the enemy property.
Any further argument from the city?
Yes. In the city of Lansing, property owners are responsible for their property. They maintain it, they keep it clean, they remove the junk, they cut the grass, and they are responsible if there are dogs barking on their property day and night. Miss Olson here is standing up for the neighborhood. Not everyone wants to come forward and make it criminal complaint. But Miss Olson had the courage to say that Mr. Cole broke the law. She approached him multiple times to let him know that this situation is ongoing. She went and knocked on his door, but he's nowhere to be found because, as he testified in here, he's out from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Officer Stover, when he was there, he came and he knocked on his door multiple times. Mr. Cole's nowhere to be found. They're not playing. He doesn't know about the barking dogs. Miss Olson, again, I would like to make my request that you find the defendant guilty. Thank you for your time.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if you could affix your attention to the screen one last time, and we will go over some final instructions. Members of the jury, the evidence and arguments in this case are finished, and I will now instruct you on the law as it applies in this case. Remember that you have taken an oath to return a true and just verdict based only on the evidence and my instructions on the law. You must not let sympathy or prejudice influence your decision. As jurors, you must decide what the facts of this case are. This is your job and no one else's. You must think about all the evidence and then decide what each piece of evidence means and how important you think it is. This includes whether you believe what each of the witnesses said. What you decide about any fact in this case is final. It is my duty to instruct you on the law. You must take the law as I give it to you. If a lawyer says something different about the law, follow what I say. At various times, I have already given you some instruction about the law. You must take all my instructions together as the law you are to follow. You should not pay attention to some instructions and ignore others. To sum up, it is your job to decide what the facts of this case are, to apply the law as I give it to you, and in that way decide the case. A person accused of a crime is presumed to be innocent. This means that you must start with the presumption that the defendant is innocent. This presumption continues throughout the trial and entitles the defendant to a verdict of not guilty unless you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that he is guilty. Every crime is made up of parts called elements. The prosecutor must prove each element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant is not required to prove his innocence or to do anything. If you find that the prosecutor has not proved every element beyond a reasonable doubt, then you must find the defendant not guilty. A reasonable doubt is a fair, honest doubt growing out of the evidence or lack of evidence. It is not merely an imaginary or possible doubt, but a doubt based on reason and common sense. A reasonable doubt is just that, a doubt that is reasonable after a careful and considered examination of the facts and circumstances of this case. When you discuss the case and decide on your verdict, you may only consider the evidence that has been properly admitted in this case. Therefore, it is important for you to understand what is evidence and what is not evidence. Evidence includes only the sworn testimony of witnesses, the exhibits admitted into evidence, and anything else I told you to consider as evidence. Many things are not evidence, and you must be careful not to consider them as such. The fact that the defendant is charged with a crime and is on trial is not evidence. The lawyer's statements and arguments are not evidence. They are only meant to help you understand the evidence and each side's legal theories. You should only accept things the lawyers say that are supported by the evidence or by your own common sense and general knowledge. The lawyer's questions to the witnesses and my question to the witnesses are also not evidence. You should consider these questions only as they give meaning to the witnesses' answers. My comments, rulings, questions, and instructions are also not evidence. It is my duty to see that the trial is conducted according to the law and to tell you the law that applies in this case. However, when I make a comment or give an instruction, I am not trying to influence your vote or express a personal opinion about the case. If you believe that I have an opinion about how you decide the case, you must pay no attention to that opinion. You are the only judges of the facts, and you should decide this case based on the evidence. At times during the trial, I have excluded evidence that was offered or stricken testimony that was heard. Do not consider those things in deciding the case. Make your decision only on the evidence that I let in and nothing else. Your decision should be based on all the evidence regardless of which party produced it. You should use your own common sense and general knowledge in weighing and judging the evidence, but you should not use any personal knowledge you may have about a place, person, or event. To repeat once more, you must decide this case based only on the evidence admitted during the trial. As I said before, it is your job to decide what the facts of this case are. You must decide which witnesses you believe and how important you think their testimony is. You do not have to accept or reject everything a witness said. You are free to believe all, none, or part of any person's testimony. In deciding which testimony you believe, you should rely on your own common sense and everyday experience. However, in deciding whether you believe a witness's testimony, you must set aside any bias or prejudice you may have based on race, gender, or national origin of the witness. There is no fixed set of rules for judging whether you believe a witness, but it may help you to think about these questions. Was the witness able to see or hear clearly? How long was the witness watching or listening? Was anything else going on that might distract the witness? Does the witness seem to have a good memory? How did the witness look and act while testifying? Did the witness seem to be making an honest effort to tell the truth, or did the witness seem to evade the questions or argue with the lawyers? Does the witness's age or maturity affect how you judge his or her testimony? Does the witness have any bias, prejudice, or personal interest in how this case is decided? Have there been any promises, threats, suggestions, or other influences that affected how the witness testified? In general, does the witness have any special reason to tell the truth or any special reason to lie? All in all, how reasonable does the witness's testimony seem when you think about the other evidence in the case? Sometimes the testimony of different witnesses will not agree, and you must decide which testimony you accept. You should think about whether the disagreement involves something important or not, and whether you think someone is lying or is simply mistaken. People see and hear things differently, and witnesses may testify honestly, but simply be wrong about what they thought they saw or remembered. It is also a good idea to think about which testimony agrees best with the other evidence of the case. However, you may conclude that a witness deliberately lied about something that is important to how you decide the case. If so, you may choose not to accept anything that witness said. On the other hand, if you think the witness lied about some things but told the truth about others, you may simply accept the part you think is true and ignore the rest. Again, the instructions that you must follow for the elements. Lansing City Ordinance 654.7D prohibited noises, generally animals and birds. To prove this charge, the prosecutor must have proven each of the following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that the defendant did own, possess, or harbor a bird or other animal, that being a dog, that the animal frequently or for a continued duration made sounds. And third, that the sounds created a noise disturbance across a residential road property boundary in the city of Lansing. The prosecutor must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the crime occurred on or about October 2nd, 2023. Within the city of Lansing, Ingham County. When you go to the jury room, you may take a written copy of the jury instructions along with your notes. You should first choose a foreperson. The foreperson should see to it that your discussions are carried out in a business-like way and that everyone has a fair chance to be heard. During your deliberations, please turn off your cell phones or other communication equipment until we recess. A verdict in a criminal case must be unanimous. In order to return a verdict, it is necessary that each of you agrees on that verdict. In the jury room, you will discuss the case among yourselves, but ultimately each of you will have to make up your own mind. Any verdict must represent the individual considered judgment of each juror. As you discuss the case, you should think about all of my instructions together as the law you are to follow. It is your duty as jurors to talk to each other and to make every reasonable effort to reach an agreement. Express your opinions and the reasons for them, but keep an open mind as you listen to your fellow jurors. Rethink your opinions and do not hesitate to change your mind if you decide you were wrong. Try your best to work out your differences. However, although you should try to reach an agreement, none of you should give up your honest opinion about the case just because other jurors disagree with you or just for the sake of reaching a verdict. In the end, your vote must be your own and you must vote honestly and in good conscience. Possible penalties should not influence your decision. It is the duty of the judge to fix the penalty within the limits provided by law. If you want to communicate with me while you are in the jury room, please have your foreperson write a note and give it to the court officer. It is not appropriate or proper for you to talk directly with the judge, lawyers, court officers, or other people involved in the case. As you discuss the case, you must not let anyone, even me, know how your voting stands. Therefore, until you return with a unanimous verdict, do not reveal this to anyone outside the jury room. When you go to the jury room to deliberate, you may take your notes and the full instructions. If you want to look at any of the reference documents or exhibits that have been admitted, you can ask for them. We didn't have any exhibits today. When you go to the jury room, you will be given a written copy of the instructions that you have just heard. As you discuss the case, you should think about all of the instructions together as the law that you are to follow. You may return a verdict of guilty of the alleged crime or not guilty. I have prepared a verdict form listing the possible verdicts. Facts can be proven by direct evidence from a witness or an exhibit. Direct evidence is evidence about what we actually see or hear. For example, if you look outside and see rain falling, that is direct evidence that it is raining. Facts can also be proved by indirect or circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence is evidence that normally or reasonably leads to other facts. So taking the same example, If you see a person coming from outside wearing a raincoat covered with small drops of water, that would be circumstantial evidence that it is raining. You may consider circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence by itself or a combination of circumstantial evidence and direct evidence can be used to prove the elements of the crime. In other words, you should consider all evidence that you believe. You may consider whether the defendant had a reason to commit the alleged crime, but a reason by itself is not enough to find a person guilty of a crime. The prosecutor does not have to prove that the defendant had a reason to commit the alleged crime. She only has to show that the defendant actually committed the crime and that he meant to do so. You should not decide the case based on which side presented more witnesses. Instead, you should think about each witness and each piece of evidence and whether you believe them. Then you must decide whether the testimony and evidence you believe proves beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. You have heard testimony from a witness who is a police officer. The testimony is to be judged by the same standards you use to evaluate the testimony of any other witness. That concludes our jury instructions. You are now going to be released so that you can begin your deliberations. You first, again, must choose a foreperson. We are getting a copy of the instructions, the full instructions for you to take with you. You can take your notes for reference. If you have any question, your foreperson will write that question down, knock on the door, and a court officer will respond to receive the question. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will, to the utmost of your ability, keep the person sworn as jurors on this trial from separating from each other, that you will not suffer any communication to be made to them or any of them orally or otherwise, and that you will not communicate with them or any of them orally or otherwise, except by order of this court until they have been discharged? So if you do so, say I do.
I do.
Thank you. All rise for the jury.
Your Honor,
Yes.
there's still a panel of 7.
Oh, you're right. You gotta dismiss one of you. One of you will get to go home.
Yes.
Juror number 2, we apologize that you won't get to go and deliberate, but we thank you for your service. Should there be a need for an alternate, you'll get a call, but you're free to go. All right. Okay, you can be seated. And did you select a foreperson? You give it to the foreperson? Okay, you can read your verdict.
Guilty of count one, not.
Did you want the jury polled?
No, please, Your Honor.
Okay, juror number one, is that your complete and accurate verdict?
Yes.
Juror number three, is that your complete and accurate verdict?
Yeah.
Number four, is that your complete and accurate verdict? And that number five, is that your true and accurate verdict?
Yes.
And number six, is that your true and accurate verdict?
Yes.
And juror number seven, is that your true and accurate verdict?
Yes.
Thank you. And we want to thank each and every one of you for your participation and for you all being attentive and asking good questions and really making sure that this process works the way it's supposed to, so that each individual has their right in for their court day today. And so we're going to release you. You've already got your payment. It's up to you. You can stay back and take questions and talk to either of the attorneys. A lot of times they want to talk and get feedback. That's completely up to you. If you want to stay, you're free to go otherwise. Thank you again for your service. All rise for the jury. You can be excused.